What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Today, I want to talk to you about The Death of Wolverine, the Weapon X program. This is a 5-issue miniseries written by Charles Soule with art by Salvador Larroca. Also, in the last couple of issues, you have Angel Unzeta and Iban Coelho doing some of the art. And this answers the question that absolutely nobody asked. What happened to the mutants that Wolverine died protecting in the Death of Wolverine miniseries? In that miniseries, there were these mutants that Dr. Cornelius was about to do the adamantium bonding process with, and Wolverine stops that, but in the process, he gets all of the adamantium on him, and then it hardens and it kills him. Now, the implication is that those mutants would have had the healing factor, much like Wolverine. Without a healing factor, you would not survive with adamantium in your body. There have been a couple of times where Wolverine loses his powers, or is in the process of losing his powers, and then the adamantium poisoning is slowly killing him. So, the adamantium bonding process will kill anyone without a healing factor. This book even opens and says, Wolverine is dead. He died surrounding by these mutants, and this is their story. But no, because none of the characters in this book actually have a healing factor. There are a whole bunch of experiments in this facility, but the ones that Wolverine died protecting, they are dead on page 1 of this book. You have this one character, Sharp. He wakes up in this room, and there's a whole bunch of dead people, and I'm assuming those are the ones that Wolverine saved from the adamantium process. And then he meets several other characters, none of whom have healing factors. So I don't believe that they are the ones that Wolverine saved from the adamantium process. And this feels like a disconnect that would have made sense if this was written by somebody other than the person who wrote the main Death of Wolverine miniseries. But Charles Soule wrote this, and he wrote The Death of Wolverine. It feels like he should know, okay, this feels a little inconsistent with the main event, but apparently he thinks that this makes sense. It doesn't make any sense to me, because if any of these characters had adamantium put in their body, they would all die. They wouldn't be able to heal from the process, and also they would slowly die from adamantium poisoning, which is what Wolverine was slowly dying from before he got covered by liquid adamantium. But you've got all these characters. You've got one who has super speed. You've got Sharp, who basically is just a really good fighter. You've got this one guy, Neuro. He's really smart, I guess. You've got this guy who calls himself Junk, and he actually thinks that that's a cool code name. He basically has animal powers, sort of. He has goat horns, which I don't think are powers. I think that's just gross. He also is able to spit venom that will melt people, and he has gills. There's this other guy who has super strength, but if he doesn't periodically use the super strength, he goes into these fits of agony that feel like they're going to kill him. And like I said, none of these characters actually have healing factors. So this opens with the premise of, remember those mutants that Wolverine died to save? Here they are, except these are not those mutants. They cannot be those mutants. They are not the same ones. So most of these characters I do not care about at all. This book tries to make me care about a couple of them, and it just doesn't work. The only one that I actually do care about for about half the miniseries is Sharp. The main guy, he wears a mask throughout the entire book, and he thinks that he has Wolverine's memories. At the end of the first issue, he takes off his mask and looks in a mirror, and he sees Wolverine's face. And there are a couple of instances where he has flashbacks of moments that he could not have had in his own life. There's one point that's Japan in 1938. There's another point that's like 1975, and he knows that he was not there for those memories. And then he sees Wolverine's face in the mirror, and throughout the first 3 issues, he thinks that he somehow has Wolverine's memories. And then these guys, they all go after Sabretooth because they believe that Sabretooth can help him, and then Sabretooth doesn't want to help them because he's evil. And then Sabretooth tells this guy, you do not have Wolverine's memories in you because Wolverine was not with me in Japan in 1938. He was actually in Madripoor in 1938. So whoever's memories you have, it's not Wolverine's, because I would have known if he was there. And so then, spoilers for this book, you find out that he actually has Ogun's memories. If you remember, in The Death of Wolverine, Wolverine fights Ogun at one point. He fights a whole bunch of his biggest enemies in that book, but he fights Ogun, and I guess this is trying to say that Ogun is kind of like Venom, in that he can bond to people, and that he doesn't have his own body, but he can kind of become a symbiotic relationship with somebody else, which is incredibly stupid. That has never been one of Ogun's powers. Yes, he can possess people, but we never got the feeling that he needed to possess people. And he talks about here how his body is dead, but he is eternal. He says, I can never be killed. Yes, you can. It seems like this guy is very close to killing you, because at one point, Sharp is trying to push Ogun out of his mind, and then Ogun even tells him, that took the last of my power. You could push me out if you wanted to. And he's alone. There's no one else beside him. So if he did that, Ogun would die. And then Ogun says, I am eternal, I cannot be killed. So, I don't know. I don't even think that Charles Soule knows. But by the end of this, Sharp and Ogun start calling themselves, are you ready for how dumb this is? Shogun. It's incredibly stupid. It feels like they came up with this guy Sharp and said, what if we have him possessed by Ogun and we called him Shogun? It's just really silly. It is one of the silliest things I've ever seen in a comic book. But anyway, by the end of this, we find out that these guys were never intended to actually be agents like Wolverine or Sabretooth. When they were experimented on, they were intended to be agents who would use their experimented abilities to do things for whatever people are behind the Weapon X program. And first of all, I get the feeling that the Paradise facility is actually not connected to the Weapon X program, even though Dr. Cornelius, he was the main guy behind the Weapon X program, and he was here in the Death of Wolverine miniseries. He was the one who almost pumped adamantium into those people, so he's there, but I get the feeling, other than Dr. Cornelius, that this is an entirely different operation run by entirely different people. There's one woman who speaks French, her name is Saphir, and I don't know who she is. I don't know if she's supposed to be important. I really don't. She's just here, and she's in charge of this program, even though we just saw Dr. Cornelius like minutes before this story in the Death of Wolverine, but now she's here, and she's in charge, I guess. But anyway, we find out these guys were not meant to actually go out and use their abilities and take orders from someone. They were literally just lab rats. These guys were just meant to be experimented on, and then they could just be dealt with, disposed of, and then they could use this process on some people who can actually use their abilities out in the field. We find out that most of these guys are actually killers, and they are considered to be very dangerous by the Paradise program, and that is why the Paradise people are going after them, because they honestly believe that these guys are a danger to society, even though they seem to be doing more danger to society than these guys are. The ones who are going after the experiments, they seem to be causing more problems than the experiments do. The experiments are just trying to get away. But we find out one of them was in prison when they took him and experimented on him. One of them was a serial killer. We don't know how he was captured. And then one of them, the character's name was Indo. She is a woman when we first meet her. And then we find out that Dr. Cornelius accidentally turned her from a man into a woman. It's really bizarre. This feels like maybe they're trying to go for like, look, we have a transgender character here, was once a man and then was transferred into a woman. It feels like they're trying to go for something like that, except I don't get the feeling that this is a positive representation of that, because Indo is not happy with this. Indo does not like that she was once a man and is now a woman. Very unhappy with this process, and did not want it to happen. It was not consensual, so it's really weird to me that they have this character who is transgender, but it's not something that the character wanted, so it doesn't feel like a positive step in that direction. It feels very odd. Honestly, it feels like they didn't even have to do that. It feels like Indo could have just been a woman. That's a really strange plot twist that I don't know if they're going to do more with. And I guess I should say that even though this is presented as a miniseries, this is actually just part of an ongoing story. I really don't understand why we had so many different miniseries around this time. You had The Death of Wolverine, which was a miniseries, and when I reviewed that, I said that it could have just been part of the ongoing Wolverine story. It didn't have to be its own miniseries. And then following that, you have this, and then following this, you have, I think, Logan Legacy, and then going into that, you have The Wolverines, which follows Sabretooth, X-23, and Daken. And I think that's a miniseries also. Why couldn't all of this have just been one long ongoing series? You have plot points carrying over from one miniseries to another. Why couldn't it have just been an ongoing series? I don't understand that. It's really frustrating, because when I see a miniseries, I'm more apt to buy that, and maybe that's why they did it. Maybe they knew that people would be less likely to buy Volume 2 of Charles Soule's ongoing Wolverine story, but they would be more likely to buy something that they think is a standalone, self-contained story. The problem is, none of these are standalone, self-contained stories. The Wolverine, the Death of Wolverine story leads into this. This leads into the Logan Legacy, and that leads into the Wolverines. None of it is self-contained. It's all one long thing, but they're presenting it as if it is a self-contained miniseries, and that's frustrating. Then, in the final part of this book, you have one standalone issue called Death of Wolverine, Life After Logan. And there you get to see some short stories featuring Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and Hizako, Armor. They are all kind of mourning the death of Wolverine, reacting to how he died, and those are written by Jeff Loveness, wrote the one with Cyclops, with art by Mario Delfinino, and then in his honor, Honor, which had Nightcrawler and Colossus. That was written by Joshua Hale Fialkov with art by Ivan Coelho once again. And then A Little Piece of You, that was the one with Armor, written by Rex Ogle with art by Patrick Scherberger. And this issue is so much better than the rest of this book. I would not recommend buying this book just for that issue, but if you went back issue hunting and you found Death of Wolverine, Life of Logan, I would recommend buying that issue. I think it's a very good issue. It reminds me of about 10 years ago, around the time when the X-Men were moving from New York to San Francisco, and then they moved to Utopia. We would get these little 4-issue minis, and within each issue, you would get 3 or 4 little short stories featuring this one character just kind of a day in their life. Colossus kind of reacting to Kitty Pryde being stuck in space, or something like that. And they would differ in tone. Sometimes you'd have a character who is secretly saving the day and nobody knows it. All kinds of different fun little self-contained stories. It reminds me of those, and I miss those days. I wish we could have more little short anthology miniseries featuring various X-Men characters. But this issue, written and drawn by all those people, so much better than the 5-issue miniseries that contains most of this book. So anyway, this was bad. I didn't enjoy it, and I don't think that Charles Soule is very suited to be doing X-Men stuff. Like I said, maybe he's good elsewhere, but he's really not good in the 2 stories that I have read, and I was willing to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because even though I did not care for the Death of Wolverine miniseries, I didn't think that that was necessarily his story. I felt like they just handed it to him and said, do this, and then he kind of did whatever he did with the Death of Wolverine. I still think he could have done a better job with it, but I didn't think that that was him coming up with that idea. But this, I don't think the editorial really cared about Sharp or Junk or Endo. I don't think they cared about any of these characters, so I don't think that he has an excuse for this book just not being very good. Ultimately, I don't care about any of these characters. I don't really care about what happens to them at the end. They seek out Sabretooth, X-23 and Daken to try and find a way to fix themselves, which seems like it would go about as well as it did when they encountered Sabretooth earlier in the miniseries. None of this is very good. I did not enjoy this. It doesn't work as a follow-up to The Death of Wolverine. It definitely doesn't work as its own story. I can't imagine someone who just says, hey, this looks good, and picks it up without any of the context. I don't think that anyone would actually care about any of these characters or what's happening to them. I certainly do not. So that is all that I have to say about The Death of Wolverine, the Weapon X program. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back later with another video. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.